If you had one final wish before death, what would you choose? A delicious meal? A last phone call to your loved ones? Elliot Graves asked for just one thing, to see his dog again. And that moment shook the justice system to its core. The courtroom was flooded with bright lights, but Elliot's heart remained dark. High above, the judge flipped through the case file with the same detachment as someone used to sign away lives in ink and red seals. Below, Elliot sat still. No resistance, no outburst, only silence. The death sentence was read out in a steady, emotionless voice. No one cried behind him, no hugs, no goodbyes. Elliot, 42, was convicted of killing a police officer during an armed robbery. No fingerprints, no DNA, only a broken security camera and a curated suspect list, in which he was the poorest name. He was taken to death row, a concrete box no bigger than a parking spot. Dim yellow light, a metal bed, a tiny window where even sunlight seemed reluctant to enter. On day 1 of the countdown, Elliot didn't sleep. Not because he feared death, but because of Conor. Conor was a mutt Elliot had rescued from a shelter 5 years earlier. Back then, Conor was a walking skeleton, his eyes darting like he'd just escaped hell. Elliot cared for him with leftover peanut butter, long nights of gentle lullabies, and hundreds of hugs given for no reason at all. They say dogs don't remember long. Elliot believed the opposite. 3 months into his sentence, Elliot wrote his first letter to the shelter, where he believed Conor had been taken. On yellowed paper, shaky handwriting, "If anyone reads this, please tell Conor I didn't abandon him. I've been locked up, I can't come back. But I miss him. Every single day. Elliot G." No reply came. Still, Elliot kept writing, every week without fail, until someone finally noticed. Her name was Jillian Park, 27, an animal care technician at Silvertail Shelter, a small rescue facility over an hour's drive from downtown. Her work was routine, cleaning cages, giving shots, feeding, comforting the battered, the starving, and the forgotten. Until one winter morning she found a letter with no clear recipient, only addressed, "To Conor." At first, I thought it was a joke. A handwritten letter, yellow paper, no stamp. But the handwriting didn't look like a prank, Jillian later recalled. The letter mentioned a brown dog, with a small scar on his left ear, who used to curl up under a work desk and loved peanut butter. Every word cut deeper than the last. Jillian lowered the letter and glanced toward the left row of kennels, where an old dog lay quietly. Conor. He had been admitted over a year ago and transferred from local police as unclaimed evidence. The file was short. No relatives. Owner incarcerated. No one asked more. No one cared. Except for Conor, who waited each day by the gate, eyes fixed on the path outside, waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. Jillian began reading the rest of the letters. Elliot never talked about the case. Never said he was innocent. Never begged. He only spoke of Conor. The time he got a cold and crawled into Elliot's jacket. The time they ran in the rain. How Conor would nudge his hand with his snout whenever Elliot hung his head in exhaustion. "He's not my dog," Elliot wrote. "I think I belong to him." Jillian found herself crying, without knowing why. Then she did what the shelter had never done before. She wrote back. The first letter was short. "Conor is safe. He misses you." 2 days later, Elliot replied, "Thank you. I thought I was fading. You just pulled me back from the dark." Jillian started asking more. About Conor and about Elliot. Why was he arrested? What happened? Why was no one standing by him? She didn't expect the truth, but Elliot told it anyway, not as a victim, not to plead, just fragments. A cop who threatened him, a witness ignored, A broken camera was never checked. Each letter is a puzzle piece. And one day, Jillian began to suspect Elliot might be innocent. September 1st. A notice slid under Elliot's cell door. Execution date, October 28th, method, lethal injection. No explanation, no ceremony, just a scrap of paper, as if announcing garbage pickup. Elliot read it, folded it, placed it beneath a plastic cup. Then he wrote, not to the governor, not to a judge, not a plea for mercy. The letter was for Jillian. I don't want a last meal. I don't need a priest. I don't need a call. But if you could do just one thing, only one, I beg you. Let me see Conor one last time, so he knows I didn't leave without saying goodbye. Jillian had read dozens of prison letters, but never one that made her hands tremble like this. Not from fear, but from pain. A pain so deep it stole the air from her lungs. The next day, she went to the shelter director. I need to bring a dog to the state prison. The director laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't, and he wouldn't help. But Jillian didn't give up. She filed petitions, sent emails, made calls, denied and denied and denied. 8 days later, a call came to the shelter. Hi, this is Mark Reyes. I represent death row inmates pro bono. Is this Jillian Park, trying to get a prisoner a visit from his dog? Jillian hesitated. Yes. Mark said he had heard about Elliot from a former colleague. He'd never met Elliot, never spoken to him. But when he read Jillian's blog post, titled, The Man Who Asked Only to Hold His Dog Before He Died, he couldn't look away. I used to believe everyone on death row deserved it, Mark said. But that letter made me feel if there's any humanity left in this system, this is the moment to find it. Mark filed for an emergency exception, and miraculously, after 2 weeks, the prison granted it. For the first time in 12 years, a death row inmate was allowed to meet his dog in a supervised visit. Jillian cried when the approval email came. October 20th, 9 days before Elliot was scheduled to die. He would get to see Conor again. That morning it rained, a steady, cleansing rain, like the sky trying to wash something away. Elliot didn't know it rained. His cell was walled off by concrete in a steel square no wider than a hand, but he knew something was coming. 8:45 a.m. Keys turned, softer than usual. Even the guards sensed something different today. Graves, visitor. 3 words. No one said dog, no one said goodbye, just visitor. The visitation room was cleared, no glass, no cuffs. Elliot sat at an old wooden table. The door opened. A brown blur rushed in, not snarling, not hesitating, as if it had always known this path, dreamed of this hallway 1,000 times. Conor. Elliot didn't speak. Conor leaped into his lap, placing his front paws on his thighs, pushing his head into Elliot's chest like not a day had passed. Elliot held him. No one spoke. No words are needed. Jillian stood outside the room, hand over mouth, eyes red. Mark turned away, blinking fast. 10 minutes passed. Elliot didn't take his eyes off Conor, like if he blinked, it would all vanish. Then suddenly, Conor began scratching at Elliot's shirt collar. Not playfully. He kept pawing at a frayed spot where the stitching had long come undone. Elliot frowned. "What are you doing, Conor?" A soft growl, not angry, but insistent. And Elliot remembered. 6 years ago, on his first night in holding, he'd hidden something inside his shirt collar. So well, even he forgot. A silver USB stick, the kind people use as keychains. He reached behind his collar. Still there, hard, cold. USB. Mark stared. "What is that?" Elliot hesitated. "I recorded part of my conversation with Sheriff Wallace the night I was arrested. I had a habit of keeping audio logs on USBs. And you kept it when arrested. Yeah, but when I got interrogated, I tucked it into the collar seam. Then, forgot. They never found it. Mark inserted it into his laptop, allowed as part of attorney-client privilege. One file, dated April 19th, he hit play. Background noise, then Wallace's voice. Graves, listen. I don't care if you did it or not. I need a name for my report. Elliot, confused. But I wasn't there. I was home. Prove it. Are you a witness? Here's your choice. Confess, or wait for some half-assed public defender and ride the lightning. Mark stopped the tape. He looked pale. Graves, this is coercion. Abuse of authority. This could invalidate the entire case. Elliot looked at Conor, gripping his hand tightly. He just saved me again. Conor didn't bark, just looked up at Elliot, as if to say, I knew you'd need it. I always knew. October 20th, 11:26 a.m. Mark Reyes left the prison, USB in their coat pocket. A ticking time bomb, a lifeline, and a charge against the system. Only 8 days left before Elliot's scheduled execution. Mark had no time for the usual appeals process. He needed an emergency stay of execution from a federal court. That meant filing within 24 hours. Proving the new evidence had significant legal weight, and above all, convincing a judge this wasn't just a desperate move from a dying man. He called an old colleague, Paula Briggs, a specialist in judicial misconduct investigations. You got a recording? She asked immediately. Wallace's voice, clear as day. Send it to me now. I've got contacts inside the Federal Criminal Oversight Office. That evening, Paula sent back confirmation. Audio confirmed authentic. 100% voice match with Wallace. Content indicates coercion, psychological intimidation, and procedural violations. You should file for emergency relief immediately. Mark barely slept. By dawn on October 21st, he filed a motion with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Included were the original audio recording, an independent forensic audio analysis, an updated statement from Elliot, evidence that Wallace had died and could not defend himself. The next morning, Federal Judge Adrian Keller ordered an emergency hearing. No press, no spectators, just 2 lawyers, 1 accused man, and an old dog waiting outside the courthouse. Keller listened to the entire recording, then sat silently for a long time. Finally, he said, "This is not merely a procedural error. This is a living example of the moral collapse within a criminal investigation. The court hereby stays Elliot Graves' execution indefinitely. A new, independent investigation will be launched." Mark collapsed into his chair. Not a victory, but life. That afternoon, Elliot received a single sheet of paper in prison. Mark's handwriting, "This isn't over, but today you're alive, and Conor is still waiting." Elliot curled up, hands over his face. Didn't cry, just breathed, long and slow, like someone pulled from a grave already dug. Meanwhile, Paula dug into Sheriff Wallace's old files, who had died 2 years prior in a single-car accident. But what first caught her attention wasn't the crash. It was Wallace's finances from his last 3 years. Salary, steady. Personal expenses, tripled. Large transactions to a real estate firm under a relative's name, signs of money laundering. Mark tracked down Luis Ortega, a delivery man who had been summoned as a witness but removed from the list overnight. Luis said he'd seen a white man fleeing the scene that night, not Elliot. His testimony was dismissed as unreliable. Why? He had a 10-year-old marijuana possession record. Mark asked. "Did anyone threaten you?" Luis gave a bitter laugh. "A cop told me that if I didn't want to be charged with perjury, I should forget what I saw." That cop? Wallace. Through sealed records, Paula found something else. The $52,000 stolen in the robbery never recovered. Meanwhile, the crash report for Wallace's accident mentioned a burnt briefcase full of cash found in his trunk. Source: unknown. Internal report: closed, not relevant. On October 24th, Mark received an anonymous call, a gravelly male voice. I used to work under Wallace. That night, it wasn't Graves at the scene. It was an ex-cop Wallace kept around for dirty work. The caller left behind street cam footage from 3 blocks away. Grainy, but clear enough. A large man, not Elliot, fled with a duffel bag. Time stamped to the minute. In his office, Mark stared at a wall of photos, documents, and wires. Elliot was never the killer. Wallace wasn't just a crooked cop. He was the center of a web of lies, manipulation, and law-wrapped murder. But Wallace was dead. And Elliot was alive, but not free. October 26th, 2 days before his scheduled execution. The Ninth Circuit Court convened a public hearing to reevaluate the case of Elliot Graves. The story had gone viral. News outlets, law students, and activists filled the courtroom. Even Jillian, in the front row, holding Conor's leash. The court had granted permission for the dog to be present as an emotional witness. Elliot entered, no longer in prison garb but a plain white shirt and slacks. His face was calm, but his eyes brighter than ever. Mark presented the audio of Wallace's coercion, the verified USB evidence, Luis Ortega's reinstated testimony, Wallace's suspicious financial records, video of the real suspect, evidence of the burned money in Wallace's trunk. Judge Keller listened. No one interrupted. No one even breathed loud. Then Paula took the stand as an expert witness. With all this new evidence, I am confident Elliot Graves was sentenced to death based on a chain of catastrophic errors. Abuse of authority, suppression of key witnesses, ignored physical evidence, and worst of all, coerced confession through psychological manipulation. This isn't a legal error. This is a judicial tragedy. When the hearing recessed for deliberation, reporters dashed out. Twitter, TikTok, YouTube lit up. Justice for Elliot. Sure, let him go. Jillian received hundreds of messages. I cried, reading about Elliot and Conor. This is why the system needs reform. I hope he walks free. October 27th, 10 a.m. The federal panel issued its ruling. The court finds that Elliot Graves was convicted on invalid evidence and serious investigative misconduct. The court rules the original conviction is vacated. Elliot Graves is exonerated. All records are to be expunged. The courtroom erupted. Jillian cried. Elliot said nothing. He just knelt. Conor ran into his arms. This time, it wasn't a visit. It was homecoming. October 28th, at the exact time he was supposed to die by lethal injection, Elliot Graves was riding in a small pickup, window down, wind in his hair, and Conor resting quietly at his feet. The prison collar was gone. The marks remained. Elliot didn't speak much during the drive home. Jillian was behind the wheel, occasionally glancing at him, unsure whether to break the silence. Eventually, Elliot spoke first. I don't know whether to thank you or apologize. You believed in me when no one else did. Jillian shook her head. I don't need your thanks. I just need you to live. And live well. Elliot temporarily moved into a small countryside farm, run by a nonprofit that helps exonerated death row inmates. It was peaceful. Trees everywhere. Plenty of space for Conor to run. For the first time in 6 years, Elliot could touch the earth without shackles, see the sky without bars, hear the birds, and know he was still alive. But freedom wasn't like in the movies. He couldn't sleep the first 3 nights. Flinched at lights, startled at the sound of doors opening, unsettled by the absence of meal bells. He avoided mirrors, avoided cameras, even avoided kind strangers who asked, "How does it feel to be free?" "I didn't win, I just survived," Elliot said in an interview. His story spread across America, TV, podcasts, international press. Jillian was invited to speak at legal reform panels. Conor became a national symbol of loyalty and the idea that sometimes a speechless creature can save a man's life. But with light came shadows. Some officers spoke out, accusing the media of smearing Wallace, who could no longer defend himself. Politicians avoided comment, and a vocal few still questioned, if he didn't do it, why was he arrested? Elliot didn't respond. He knew the truth didn't fix everything, but he still held it like a candle in the dark, trembling but lit. Every night when Elliot struggled to sleep, Conor lay at the foot of the bed, unmoving. He didn't ask questions, didn't expect Elliot to be okay, just stood guard between him and the nightmares. One day, during a talk with law students, Elliot ended with a single line. "I didn't come back from the dead to be a symbol. I just want to say, if a dog can sense right from wrong, then surely people can too." A week after his exoneration, Elliot received a letter from the Federal Criminal Justice Oversight Committee. Not an apology, a summons to testify. The hearing was held in the Capitol, a place typically filled with political speeches, budget arguments, and photo ops. But that day, they came to hear from a man who had nearly been executed by the very system they built and survived. Across from him sat rows of senators and committee members, and a few empty chairs. The Memphis Police Department's rep is absent. The prosecutor from Elliot's trial, unwell. The State Investigation Office, no show. Jillian sat quietly in the back. Conor lay beneath her feet, older now, clearly slowing down. But his eyes remained sharp, almost as if he understood every word. Elliot rose, holding prepared notes, but didn't read them. He looked straight ahead. "I don't have a speech. I'm not an activist. I'm not the perfect victim. I stole things when I was young. I've had anger issues, but I am not a murderer. I nearly died, not because I committed a crime, but because someone needed a name to fill a blank. If not for a dog, if not for a girl at an animal shelter, I would be dead, quietly." One senator asked, "Do you still believe in the justice system?" Elliot gave a dry smile. "I believe in people, not systems. Because systems didn't look me in the eye, didn't hear my voice. Only people, like Miss Jillian, like Attorney Reyes, actually listened. Systems only read paperwork." Following the hearing, Congress introduced the Graves Reform Act, a package of judicial reforms, including a ban on using coerced confessions as sole evidence, mandatory recording of all police interrogations, allowing emotional support animals during certain legal proceedings, automatic case review when new evidence surfaces post-death sentence. A journalist asked Jillian, "Do you think Elliot forgives the system?" Jillian looked out the window, where Elliot stood under a tree with Conor. She shook her head. "Number, but I think he's learning to forgive himself." One November afternoon, the air crisp and thin like silk over autumn fields, Elliot sat on the wooden porch of the farmhouse. Conor lay beside him. Not running anymore, not chasing butterflies, not barking at passing cars, just resting. Calm. Jillian arrived with coffee and some pastries. She didn't knock. Conor no longer got up to greet. Elliot smiled when he saw her, but his eyes were red. He didn't eat this morning, didn't even stand up. Jillian knelt. Conor was still breathing, slow and light like each breath was a miracle. She ran her fingers through his snow-white fur, feeling the heartbeat beneath the fragile ribs. Elliot placed his hand on Conor's head. I don't think I would have survived 6 years without him in my mind, and I don't think I'll live the rest of my life right without him in my heart. Conor opened his eyes, a glimmer of light, as if to say, I know. Twilight came. Elliot and Jillian sat side by side. Conor, as if sensing his time, gently laid his head on Elliot's knee. No whimper, no dramatic final breath. He just went, like a breeze returning to the forest. Elliot sat there all night. Jillian said nothing. She just stayed. They buried Conor behind the house, beneath an old oak tree. A small hand-carved stone read, Conor, friend, lifesaver, keeper of truth. You never left. 3 weeks later, Elliot received a package from Mark Reyes's office. Inside, a letter. Mark wrote, After I heard about Conor, I thought you should have this. It was part of the case file, just a small thing, but I don't think it belongs in storage. Inside the box was Conor's old collar, the one he wore when Elliot was arrested, and which had been removed when he was taken to the shelter. Attached was a small metal tag, hand-etched years ago. If you ever get lost, I'll find you. Elliot pressed the collar to his chest. No more tears, just a breath, calm and whole. For the first time since freedom.